Boris Johnson faces disquiet with the electorate, not only in this by-election, but also from within the party. Electorate first. Can he cure his problems and win back the affections of the electorate?
Well, Alistair, it's lovely to be on your programme, and hopefully, despite a lack of sleep, I can make some sense. Yes, I think he can. I think it's going to be difficult. I personally didn't go to North Shropshire, but I talked to an awful lot of Tory MPs and activists who did. And quite remarkably, compared to the general election victory 2 years ago, where he was such an asset to the Conservative Party, without exception, people told me that people were moaning about Boris Johnson in various ways. They couldn't believe what he said. Is he focused on the job? Why has he got all these ethical issues, etc., etc., etc.? I worry, I haven't concluded, but I worry that a reputation has now formed around Boris Johnson that is very negative. And while the British people are forgiving about individual indiscretions, and that's why I don't think we saw immediate poll reaction to some of the controversies like the redecoration of the Downing Street flat immediately, once they've seen repeated sort of transgressions, they take a firm view. They don't tolerate that in public life. And I fear if Boris Johnson isn't at that point, he's close to it.
Fascinating, because I always thought, and I've covered him going right back to mayoral times when I was working for ITV in London as well as on the network. And one of the great truths always struck me, and I found it almost incomprehensible, was virtually anything that he did, they would forgive him. Yeah, but it's Boris, that's Boris. That has changed. I don't think the misdemeanours have necessarily got any worse or any better. They're still the same sort of stuff. But for some reason, suddenly, enough is enough. Can you fathom that?
I think it's partly what you were just discussing with Charles Walker, Alistair. These are incredibly serious times. When you are Mayor of London, it's an important job, but it's not leading your country through Brexit. It's not leading your country during a pandemic. It's not leading your country when Russia might be about to invade Ukraine. And there is a sense, and I shouldn't just say it's a sense of people in North Shropshire and elsewhere, I have it too. Is Boris Johnson focused enough on the job? And what Charles Walker just said about the country wouldn't forgive the Conservative Party if they got rid of a leader when they need the leader to be focused on finding answers to our challenges, he's right. But, what if that leader isn't capable or willing, or a combination of both, of rising to that challenge of crafting solutions to the big problems we face as a country? I don't know the answer to that question, but the fact that I'm asking it so publicly on your programmes, I hope, suggests to you and to your viewers how worried I am that the answer to that question is that he isn't up to the job and to the challenges we face.
Up to getting Brexit done in sunny uplands back in 2019, but it's a different world now. Point taken, and a very, very important one as well. Shift you to the second part of my introductory question, and that, to me, this is really the profound one. For the party, and you've articulated it more strongly perhaps than many, but others like our mutual friend Ian Martin have also said it, he has lost it economically. He is not a Conservative anymore on tax nor on spend. You've even called him a con-socialist.
I don't think I've done that, but I've come probably close to it. I think the problem is, compared to Margaret Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher suffered enormously unpopular midterm election results, and people are comparing what we've seen in North Shropshire and in Cheshire and Amersham with what Mrs Thatcher experienced. The big difference between the two is that Mrs Thatcher did really difficult things at the start of her parliament. It's what the best prime ministers do. They enact unpopular legislation. They take on vested interests. And that causes short-term opposition. But you hope that the bet that they make is by the time of the end of a 4 or 5 year parliament, the hard yards that you put in will start to bear fruit. And so that's the absolute relevant bullseye of your question, Alistair. What has Boris Johnson done on tax reform or making the state more efficient or reforming various public services that'll actually begin to see benefits in the minds of voters at the next election? And I fear the answer to that is not enough. And even before the pandemic struck, flagship projects like Levelling Up were to say, were sketchy. And Mrs. Thatcher wouldn't have allowed that.
No, I totally 100% agree with that. Let me stick with your analogy and play with it just for one final question on that, and then I've got a final question for you, as it were. If some senior figure, or even someone like
Alistair, he's always got a final point in his sermon.
Back in the days of Thatcher, if someone who worked for her, like Matthew Parris or John Whittingdale, brought along this fellow, tall, stocky fellow with slightly fluffy blonde hair, for quite a senior post, and Margaret Thatcher said yes, but the key question is he one of us? Would they be able to say yes of Boris Johnson today in 2021? He is one of us.
Well, look, I don't know. Charles said that there were different flavours of conservatism.
I think it's more than that.
I honestly not quite sure fully what the Conservative agenda should be at the moment. But this is the thing I do know. This is one of my big takeaways from today, is people who've never considered even voting Liberal Democrat voted Liberal Democrat en masse in North Shropshire yesterday. 2 years ago, they gave the Tories a thumping majority. 2 years before that, they almost put Jeremy Corbyn into power. Just before that, they voted for Brexit against all the political wisdom. Trump has been elected. All over the world, the great continuity is that voters are saying we want change. And that is the responsibility of those that really seek to lead. What is it that is making voters so restless at the moment? And I would like to see the Conservative Party thinking really deeply about what that means for reform of the state, ensuring that people who've been thrown on the scrap heap in the middle of their lives because of industrialization and globalization, what does that mean for our people, our fellow citizens? And I just don't see that level of thinking going on inside Boris Johnson's government. So what kind of conservatism it is, is probably the secondary question. It's the lack of big thinking in response to this persistent populist rebellion that makes me much more worried than whether we can win the next election. I don't want to just win elections. I want to win elections for a purpose and to serve our country.
The last two big changes in our lifetime were Thatcher in 79 and Blair in 97. Thatcher barely heard of, shadow education secretary, I think, before becoming Prime Minister. Blair shadowed a few things and was an impressive parliamentary performer, but not with a CV as long as your arm. Is it time for the party that you were once a member of, but might even consider one day going back to under the right leadership?
I'm a member again now, although Boris Johnson probably regrets that.
Is it time for them to take a deep breath and contemplate, if not right now, but in the near future, to jump a generation? Interesting when people like Tom Tugendhat's name gets mentioned in the same breath as Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. Is that time approaching? Jump a generation, fresh start, new ideas, vision?
No, I'm going to appeal to you, Alistair. We've both got quite a bit of grey on our heads. I don't think it is the time for youth and inexperience. I want people who've been round the block once or twice, who know how government works, who know how to take on vested interest. I think Tony Blair would probably be a better Prime Minister now if he was in office. I think David Cameron would be a better Prime Minister than when he started in office. I don't want to emulate China in every way, but the leading countries of the world they aren't choosing inexperienced TV-savvy people to be their leaders. They're looking for people who've done the great offices, who know how the systems work and who can deliver change. And so I'm looking for people who have a track record of success to be the next prime minister. And for a party that regards itself as the competent grown-up party in British politics, that's how the Conservative Party has traditionally sold itself, we need to put forward a leader after Boris who people look at and think, I trust that person with my money. I trust that person to oversee the nation's public services.